I thank you for coming back to the conversation. And listen, I want you to understand, Uncle Nearest made more than whiskey. He made history, but few people knew the details of that history until Fawn Weaver published her book, Love and Whiskey. It is a New York Times bestseller that took a lot of research and hours and years and digging and asking, tell me more, from folks whose trust you had to earn before you really could even start the conversations, right?
Absolutely.
Tell me more.
I didn't do, a traditional, you would sit, you would call to interview, and you'd sit there and you would take notes. And for me, I would call folks and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Can I interview you? And I would just put my phone on the table and just let them know I'm recording. And my hope was people would forget the phone was there, which they always did.
Of course.
And then one story would lead to another, because when you have something like this, you're really, the basis of it is oral history. Most don't usually have the documents to back up the oral history.
Right.
And in this instance, I knew you're talking about the most beloved brand, American brand around the world. There is not an American brand around the world that is ubiquitous as Jack Daniel's.
Right.
You go anywhere in the world and you say, I'm from Tennessee, and they go, Lynchburg.
Right, right.
Jack, and that took 160 years, right, of them working on that. And so when you were coming smack dab in the middle of someone else's history, oral history will not work. You have to be able to prove it. You have to be able to back it up with documentation.
You've got to get the primary sources, the secondary sources, as a historian, something that you're very familiar with. But here comes this lady from LA. And her husband. And they're driving around and they're asking all these questions. The trust component was on both sides, right? From black folks in Lynchburg and white folks in Lynchburg, right?
And when you're coming into the South, they don't necessarily trust you as they shouldn't. They don't necessarily trust you, but they will be welcoming to you.
Right.
And so I would say that I certainly had to earn their trust. I did not have to earn their welcome.
Right. So let's talk about what you learned, because there are misconceptions about who Uncle Nearest was and what he taught versus how the story was, the narrative when it was shared was inaccurately told.
Well, until 1978, even at Jack Daniel Distillery, it was always told who Nearest Green was. His boys, George and Eli, who took over after he retired. The story of the Green family was always interwoven with Jack Daniel history. It wasn't until 79 when new leadership, new management, they decided to rewrite the story for the tours, the different things that were said. And so we can pinpoint exactly when it happened. I actually can pinpoint who it was that made those changes. But even in the book, I intentionally leave him out because I don't want for his family to be responsible for his sin.
Right. And you said, you were very clear throughout your research and building trust. I'm not here, especially when
I'm not here to harm anyone.
I don't want to harm the relationship and the history and the legacy of Jack Daniel.
Because it would have been overshadowed. If there was a focus on who removed the story, then we're not talking about Nearest Green's legacy.
But you also had to deal with folks who said you kind of gave Jack Daniel a break, if you would. And so
because he deserved a break.
Tell me more. Explain.
So the story that had been shared around the world very quickly was Jack Daniel was a slave owner. He stole the recipe. He hid the slave. And they did it based on this photograph. Now, this photo, at the time, I thought it was 19th century. We now have it pegged to circa 1904. But if you want to hide a slave and steal the recipe, it's real simple. Don't photograph that they ever existed. If you look at every single bourbon in Kentucky going back to the 19th century, they all had black distillers. You only have to walk into a distillery that from that time frame. They reopened up in Mount Vernon. And so you can see exactly what it was like to make whiskey around the time that Nearest Green was like. It was the enslaved people doing that. Right.
And it was Nearest Green who taught a young Jack Daniel, a boy. Right. I think some people think that there was a different age, like they didn't realize that Uncle Nearest was the one who was teaching.
He was absolutely teaching him. And when you're talking about that Lincoln County process that came in with the West Africans, the filtering traditional bourbon distillate through sugar maple charcoal before it goes into the barrel. So that was a process that he taught Jack Daniel, but it's also the process that continues to this day to distinguish Tennessee whiskey from everything else. It's still a straight bourbon whiskey by legal definition, but it's got a little something more special to it
that we're going to enjoy here
shortly. They're going down for that reason.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk about this land that you purchased and what happened here. Is this where Nearest Green was teaching the little boy Jack who was sent to go over and learn how to distill whiskey?
Yeah, so this property is 313 acres. We completely restored the home where Jack grew up, but this is where the original Jack Daniel distillery was.
Okay.
It's distillery number 7. That is where it was located. It wasn't where it currently is. And so this is the only known master distiller for distillery number 7 is Nearest Green. So this is the property.
And you found a lot of history in this home once you were able to get access.
Absolutely. Well, in the home, and the owners were there. And even the irony of the fact that this had been on the market for 15 months. And the owners, every time someone would come in and place an offer, they would raise the price because they felt as though this property was so special that they didn't want to turn it over to the wrong hands. And they met my husband and me, and it was their dogs that chose us.
Oh, that's right. You do talk in the book about how, the dogs fell in love with you, and you fell in love with the dogs.
Yeah, and I brought them with me after the owners moved.
I want to go back to the photograph that we see on the cover of Jack Daniels. Right?
On the cover of Love and Whiskey. Sure.
That picture, everyone thinks the black man in the photo, the brother, but that's not
Nearest Green.
That's not Nearest Green.
That is his son, George Green.
Let's talk about.
There's several significant things about this photo. The first is if you pay attention, the photo is about Jack Daniel, but Jack Daniel is not in the center position.
Right.
He put someone else in the center position.
What does that tell you?
That told me immediately, when the world was saying that this was a story that was negative, it told me immediately, oh, absolutely not.
There's a different narrative here.
Jack Daniel is trying to tell us something, and he's trying to make sure that man in the middle gets his due. And keep in mind, we talk about Nearest Green because Nearest Green was Jack's teacher, but George Green is the one who we have documented side by side with Jack. And so there is equal significance, I believe, when we're talking about the two. But the other thing you'll notice is if you look at that photo, Jack Daniel is the only one who's not seated. He's actually standing.
Right.
And it's because his right leg is amputated. And so you have George Green isn't just there in the center strategically because of a relationship. He's also the person who he trusts to lean on so that the world didn't know that he only had one leg.
The history, you have to read this or listen to it, because the history lessons are amazing. We're going to take a break, more conversation about the lessons learned and how much of this is not about, as you said, your empire, but really the Green legacy.
Absolutely.
Conversation continues right after the break. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I really want to thank you for season 3 of Portia. It's because of loyal viewers like you that we keep getting to share this daily dose of positivity all across the country. So just a reminder, I still need you to like, comment, and subscribe, and go ahead and tell your friends. You can catch us now in Orlando, in San Francisco, in Atlanta, and all across the country on Fox Soul. Tell your friends. We'll see you soon on Portia.